Oh, hi. I didn't see you all there. Welcome to week 6. I'm just playing a little banjo and celebrating because as you're watching this video, you have finished, I hope, officially our first project for the term, the Entering the Conversation Argument Project. A 10-week term isn't very much time, so pat yourselves on the back. Congratulations. Thank you for all your hard work up to this point. And now this video is, in this video, we're going to turn our attention towards our next project, the Discourse Community Report. This will overview the project more generally, and we'll focus on, of course, sort of the capstone, the key assignment, the Discourse Community Report. In subsequent videos, we'll go through and look at the calendar and discuss each of these assignments in a bit more detail. But this is an overview. This is the long view for this next project. I think it's worth doing what I think it's worth reviewing the differences between these two assignments. Well, first of all, one of the things I want to bring to your attention is, although we've been working on the Entering the Conversation argument for what seems like ages, the stakes go up as we continue to move through. In other words, that although we've been working on this project, it seems for the last, maybe the last decade, it's important to remember that was only technically 250 points. It's only technically 25% of our work in this course. So I think that's a good argument for continuing to work so diligently as we move on to this next project, the Discourse Community Report project. Now, when I first overviewed all of the assignments in this course, I really wanted to distinguish the two differences between these projects, and I've highlighted those, I think, the key differences here, right? In the Entering the Conversation argument, we had a lot of leeway. We got to choose sort of any issue or conflict that was concerning the discourse community. And our audience members, our audience was members of that discourse community or outsiders who were interested in issues or conflicts addressed. The example I gave, which you may be tired of by this point, but I had a student who selected the bodybuilding discourse community just to refresh our memories, and he was really interested in the issue of whether or not testing for performance-enhancing drugs should be required at all weightlifting, all bodybuilding events, right? So that's an issue that, of course, the bodybuilding community cared about. It concerns that community. Also, we could make it interesting for a general audience as well. Now, in our discourse community report, we still have a lot of agency. We still have a lot of leeway here about what topic we're going to focus on within our discourse community. But we do have one more constraint. We have a constraint that we didn't have in the Entering the Conversation argument. Namely, that we're finding a specific debatable thesis about how our discourse community uses language, literacy, writing, or rhetoric. This is the project that's really going to help us hit the first and second learning outcomes for this course, right? At the end of this course, we are supposed to have done an inquiry project in which we've analyzed real-world rhetorical situations for how they use language, writing, literacy, so on and so forth. So that's a constraint that we have to consider as we plan our trajectory for this project. So what does that look like in our previous example? Well, of course, unless you're tired of this example, our previous student, he was interested in the work he had done. He was still kind of interested in this idea about PEDs in the bodybuilding community. So how did he shape that curiosity into a project that met this criteria, that was about somehow language literacy, writing, or rhetoric? Well, he did a study of the lexis of the bodybuilding community, the specialized language that discourse community necessarily has, right? All discourse communities necessarily have some specialized language, and he looked at the lexis surrounding the use of performance-enhancing drugs, and ultimately said, well, after I've used, G's idea of literacy, G's idea of literacy, after I've used Class's idea of lexis, it's clear. Ultimately, his argument was, it's clear that what that specialized lexis implies, some of the values that are an undercurrent of the discourse of the current bodybuilding community. One of those values is that performance-enhancing drugs are becoming more accepted. So just some examples. Of course, this move for you can look like anything, really. Last week, we talked about some ideas from writing studies about literacy, discourse, inclusion, membership, identity. Any of those ideas we can take and apply to our discourse community. This week, we're going to look further at some other ideas from writing and rhetoric studies, the idea of lexis, the idea of genre and genre analysis and genre theory. Those are ideas we can take and apply to our discourse community and basically ask, okay, scholars say, lexis should work like this. How does lexis work in my discourse community? So that's the crux of it here, is we now have to work within that same discourse community, but ask some questions and ultimately have some answers, not about just any issue, but about an issue concerning the use of language, writing, literacy, or rhetoric. Of course, as we know, so our audience changes here. Our audience for this they're scholars who are interested in writing, rhetoric, literacy studies, discourse community, so on and so forth. It's not harmful to imagine your audience here as the authors we've been reading, right? We want to write something that James G would care about, or something that Dan Melzer would find interesting. So as our audience shifts, our audience shifts to people who are interested in discourse communities and literacy studies, so does our content, our text, so does our message. That's Rhetoric 101. As audience shifts, so does our message and our tactic shifts. And that's what's going on here. So other than that, we'll see a lot of similarities from the last project in this project. Again, what we see is a bunch of small scaffolding assignments that build up to a final large higher stakes discourse community report, right? A large higher stakes essay. And we'll look at the criteria from that essay in just a minute. But on the whole, we're going to start with a little pre-writing exercise. These are going to be questions regarding, similar to previously. We're going to ask you, well, what concept specifically do you want to look at in your discourse community? What questions surrounding your discourse community's use of rhetoric, language, writing, etc. are you going to focus on? Then we're going to do some research. It's important to remember that we're asked to do primary as well as secondary research. So we'll do another annotated bibliography here, and we'll also include primary research. And then we're going to try it out. We're going to come up with a draft. We're going to get some really good peer review. And additionally, since we're working toward a 200-point assignment, since we're working towards an even higher stakes essay here, an additional step is the revision plan conference. So after you write a draft, after you get some peer review from your peers, you're actually going to sit down with me one-on-one, so to speak, via Zoom. We're going to schedule one-on-one meetings, and you and I will talk one-on-one about the best plan moving forward to successfully finish your Discourse community report. Of course, then you'll turn that in, and we'll do a brief reflection memo, just like we did in the last project. So what are the specifics of the final culminating assignment, the Discourse community report? Well, pause the video here if you haven't yet gone and read through in its entirety this prompt. I'll go through and I'll hit some highlights and I'll make some comments on this assignment as a whole. Our task here is very similar to what we achieved early in the previous project. Informed by our primary and our secondary research, we're crafting a narrow, original, well-supported, well-researched argument. Again, here's that crux about how our discourse community uses writing, rhetoric, language, or literacy. This argument, as always, as all good scholarly academic arguments should do, it should move the conversation surrounding literacy, writing, rhetoric, or language forward in some way. In about 2,000 or 250 words. That's 8 to 10 double-spaced pages, depending on what formatting you're using, but it's a longer paper. In so many words, we're going to achieve these goals. We're going to introduce a scholarly audience to the discourse community and the writing or rhetoric or literacy-related question that you have identified. So one of the fun things about this assignment is you are writing to scholars of language, but they are not experts on your discourse community. So you need to establish some, establish a little bit of background. For instance, if you are interested in analyzing the lexis of the Dungeons and Dragons community, part of the fun of this is explaining, how the lexis works, how the genres work. A lot of this is, some fun of this assignment is making sure people understand how communication works in that discourse community, or writing, or rhetoric, or language, or literacy. Of course, we want to contribute to the scholarly conversation. And we're going to collect data, primary research, and we need to, analyze that research in a way that supports some new finding. Again, this is really exciting because we get to take some established, writing some established ideas from writing studies, say G's idea of discourse with a capital D. We can take that and we can say, G has said X, Y, and Z about discourse. Let's see if it holds up when I apply it to this Dungeons and Dragons community, right? No one's done that before, and voila, there we are. We are moving the conversation forward in a productive way. Boom. I do suggest reading through this planning and drafting. This is going to be structured. We'll read many examples of this, but this is going to be really structured as, the way that a lot of writing studies papers are structured sort of mimics the scientific approach. We're going to have a CARS, an introduction or a review of literature, in which we say, hey, here's what we already know. Then we have to describe our methodology, the way that we went about collecting primary research. Then we have to provide that primary research, and so we'll have an introduction. We'll sort of have a method section. If this is sounding like science writing to you, it's not a coincidence. This is how a lot of writing studies in social science gets done. And then we'll have an analysis or a results section in which we take the primary data we've collected, whether that's an interview, whether that's interviews, whether that's surveys, whether that's observation of some primary material, and we analyze it and say, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, here's my research question, here are the methods I conducted to answer that question, and here are the answers I found, right? That's the structure of this assignment.